In stage 6, we're learning two new tenses, the imperfect and the perfect tense. They are both past tenses insofar as they happen in time previous to now, but we're going to use the same SEW, S-E-W method to conjugate verbs in the imperfect and the perfect tense. Let's start with a review of the present tense. The stem we use is what's called the present stem, and we're actually going to use that same stem for the imperfect tense. It's the second principal part, that second form, and you remove the RE. So that's the stem. The endings we know are O, S, T, NT, and then what I call the weirdness is that third conjugation, the E either changes to an I, or in that third person plural it changes to a U, and then in the fourth conjugation you get that I-U-N-T for the form in the third person plural. So that should be pretty familiar to you. As far as translating these new tenses, the imperfect tense is going to be translated was or were verbing. That's going to be the main translation. We'll talk about some other ways to translate it down the road, but I was running, you were laughing, they were fighting. Those are all going to be the imperfect tense. The perfect tense is going to be just straight up verbed, or if it's an irregular verb, whatever the past tense is. I ran, she kicked the ball, they slept. So the imperfect tense shows something happening in the past that happens over a period of time, whereas the perfect tense shows something happening in the past that's happened and is over with. So that's the main gist of the difference, and we'll talk about the differences between these tenses in classes to come. But the imperfect was or were verbing, the perfect verbed. So as I mentioned before, the stem for the imperfect tense is the same as for the present tense. So you go to the second principal part, the second form of the verb, and you remove the RE. This is what's called the present tense. So it's going to be the exact same stem. The stem is always going to end in a vowel. So you got to keep that in mind. The endings are bomb, boss, bot, and then bont in the plural. We'll fill in these two forms in a few chapters. So bomb, boss, bot, bont. And then the weirdness you need to know, there's only one set of weirdness. In the fourth conjugation, the stem will end in an I, and you are going to add an E before you add the BA, whatever that ends up being. So, and I'll show you an example of this, but the only weirdness, there's no third conjugation weirdness, it's only the fourth conjugation, and you're going to add an E before you add the BA of the endings. So let's practice this. The stem for clamo, clamare, first of all, we notice that this is a first conjugation verb. You should always check that first. The stem is clama. So you are going to write the stem. There's no copying here. You're going to write the stem 4 times, clama. You are then going to write the endings, bom, bos, bot, bont, and because this is first conjugation, there's no weirdness, we're done. I was shouting, you were shouting, he was shouting, they were shouting. That's the imperfect tense of the verb, of a first conjugation verb. Here we have a second conjugation verb. We've got the EO and the ERE. So the stem, you take off the RE, is habe. We're going to do the exact same thing. Write the stem 4 times. And then we are going to add the endings. So bomb, boss, bot, bont. I was having, you were having, he was having. That's the translation of that. It's second conjugation, so no weirdness, we're done. So pono ponere, this is third conjugation. You've got the ERE, and then you look over here, there's no EO there, so that means it's third conjugation. And this is where you have to be strict with what the stem is. Even though sometimes that E is going to change, the stem still is pone. So there's going to be no vowel shift in the imperfect tense. That E is going to stay an E. In fact, it becomes a stronger E in this. You don't need to know that. And then you add bom, bos, bot, bont. I was putting, you were putting, he was putting, they were putting. No weirdness. This E stays an E. It does not change. And so here we are with this fourth conjugation verb, dormire. So the stem is dormi. So we're going to do what we've always done, which is write the stem 4 times. And then if we do it in the order I'm asking you to do it in, you're going to then write bom, bos, bot, bont. But this is the one place where you have to think about the weirdness. And the weirdness is you add an E here. In all these forms, you're going to add an E. So it's dormie bom, dormie bos, dormie bot, dormie bont. And you're going to see this E show up in a few other forms. So I was sleeping, you were sleeping, he was sleeping. Nice thing is you've basically learned all the weirdness you're ever going to have to learn with verbs. So this is just one more little tiny, quirk you need to memorize. And then when we move on to the perfect tense, there is no weirdness ever. So now I want you to go to the verb section of your binder and pull out the 2 colored sheets that have the charts with the endings. So if you need to pause this for a second to find those, that's great. So we already have the present tense filled out. For the imperfect tense, the stem, you can write down that the stem is what's called the present stem. And it's just like the present tense. It's going to be the second principal part, and you remove the RE. So that's the stem, and then you are going to write bom, bos, bot, bont. Those are going to be the endings. Again, for now we're going to leave these boxes blank. We'll fill them in a little bit. So go ahead and fill that chart in. This chart has a lot of the same stuff, but it's good just to have it because it has the weirdness. So the stem is the second principal part. Remove the RE. We're going to add the endings bom, bos, bot, bont. And then for weirdness, I would just say fourth conjugation. The stem is going to end in an I. I would write down that you're going to add an E, and then go ahead and write the BA that you're going to add. So that'll just remind you that this E is going to show up. It's not that something changes to an E, you add an extra E. So now we're going to talk about the perfect tense. So for the perfect tense, we're going to use a new stem. The stem is the third principal part, so that's why I've been having you guys write that down. The third principal part, and you remove the I. So whereas the present stem, and this is called the perfect stem, the endings you're going to add are E, isti, it, erunt. But the beautiful thing about it is there is no weirdness ever. And what you're going to find is, as soon as you move to the third principal part and start dealing with the perfect stem, every verb behaves exactly the same in the entire Latin language. It doesn't matter what conjugation they are. There is no weirdness. The most irregular verbs in the world, as long as you can count to 3 and go to that stem based on the third principal part, every verb is going to act exactly the same. So that's nice to know. So before we start conjugating some verbs, let's just remind ourselves what the stem we're going to be using is. So we go to 1, 2, 3. We go to the third principal part, and we take off the I. So this stem would be ris, R-I-S. This one, take off the I, rogav. Wendo, wendere, when did. And then wenio, wenire, when. Obviously here, both the present stem and the perfect stem are the same. You'll see that every once in a while, but it's not very common. So let's conjugate some verbs. So clamo, clamare, it's a first conjugation verb, but it doesn't really matter in the perfect tense. The stem is clamav. I'm just pronouncing that V just to make sure you remember to write it at the end. And so you are going to write clamav 4 times, and then we're going to add the endings. E, isti, it, erunt. Now you'll notice that these are the same, so if you want to go back to that copying method that we used in the present tense, you can copy that first form because this is the first person singular perfect tense verb. So if you'd rather do that, that's fine, but if you want to just write the stem and add the endings, that's great as well. First conjugation, it doesn't matter because it's perfect tense, no weirdness. Same thing here, the stem is habu, so you can write habu 4 times, and then we're just going to add those exact same endings. E, istiit, and erunt. Done. Pono ponere, third conjugation, but doesn't matter because we're in the perfect tense. Pasu is the stem, and then same endings. E, isti, it, erunt. We're done. No weirdness, nothing. I'm sure you're getting the hang of it now. Dormio, dormire, dormiwi. If we want to try it the other way, we can just copy this, dormiwi, and then let's go ahead and write the stem, dormiv, dormiv, and dormiv, and then we are going to add those endings. We've already written the E, so we can write isti, it, erunt. There we go. So like before, go ahead and refer to those charts that are in your binder. The stem here, so this is called the perfect stem, and you can write down that it is the third principal part. Remove the I, and then the endings are going to be E, isti, it, erunt, and we're done. We'll fill these guys in the next few chapters. This is even more redundant because we have no weirdness to add, but the stem is the third principal part. Remove the I. And then the endings are E, isti, it, erunt. So that's the perfect and the imperfect tense. Perfect tense totally regular. Every verb in the whole Latin language, once you move beyond the second principal part, acts exactly the same. So that's nice. Imperfect tense, the endings, bom, bos, bot, and all you have to remember is that fourth conjugation, ie.